I cannot keep living like this. I love my husband very much, but his high sex drive is stressing the life out of me. It is reaching a point where I cannot take this anymore, and just thinking about it makes me cry. It is affecting everything. My love for him is gradually turning into bitterness. I don't feel loved. I feel like I'm being used. I don't know if this is just a high sex drive, or if it's something deeper, like a sex addiction. I am so confused right now, and I feel like I am forced into doing what I don't want to do. Is sex the duty of a wife, even if it feels forced? This issue has been going on for months now, and it is really disturbing me. My husband has lost his mind. He seems obsessed with sex, and his behavior is causing me pain and driving me crazy. Before this particular issue started, I and my husband were happily married for years. We have 3 beautiful daughters, but we don't have a son. At first, my husband didn't seem to have any problems with having daughters. But after our 3rd girl was born, it became a big issue for him. He used to be happy with our family, but now he desperately wants a son. I started noticing a change in my husband's attitude. He started bringing up the issue of how we don't have a son, and how he was not okay with the fact that we don't have a boy after giving birth to 3 children. All of a sudden, his sex drive increased. His opinion was that if we really cared about having a boy in our family, we had to keep trying. His desire for a boy has overshadowed our happiness. My husband's obsession for having a son started becoming very unhealthy. His desire to keep trying for a boy turned into him constantly demanding for sex. He asks for sex almost every time, morning, night, and sometimes, even in the middle of the day. It was as if a switch flipped in him. I can remember the very first day he started showing this unnatural behavior. It was an early Monday morning. I was getting dressed for work, when he came into the room and demanded that we have sex. I was shocked because I expected him to know it would make me late for work. I felt he was being so selfish and inconsiderate. I told him that I had to leave for work soon, and that whatever we wanted to do could wait until after we came back from work. But he brushed off my concerns, insisting it was his right as my husband, and that I was refusing to perform my duties as his wife. He accused me of not caring enough about having a son, and even tried to justify his reason for demanding sex that early morning by saying that his sexual urge was highest in the morning, so it made sense for us to have sex then. I was angry. I told him I cared about having a boy, but I believe children are blessings from God, whether boy or girl. I know it would be lovely to have a son, but we can't control these things. We should be grateful for what we have. But he was not interested in all of that. His obsession with having a son spilled over into every aspect of our lives, including our sex life. I gave in to his demands that morning to avoid a fight, but it felt like he was using guilt and manipulation to get what he wanted. I felt sexually harassed. I wasn't okay with it at all. I didn't enjoy it but tolerated it to keep him from getting angry. But it didn't stop there, the whole situation got even worse. My husband's actions began to intrude on my sleep. I have always had some sleep problems, but my husband is now making my sleep problems even worse. I need to take sleeping pills to find sleep, and I usually prefer total darkness in the room so my sleep won't be interrupted. My husband knows about it, but despite knowing about my sleep issues, and how I rely on sleeping pills to sleep well, he disturbs my sleep by touching me and demanding sex from me when I'm deep into sleep. It drives me mad. I keep telling him to stop, but he doesn't listen. Imagine telling someone to stop disturbing you for hours while you are trying to sleep. I'm getting to the point that I can't stand this anymore. I wake up tired because I could barely sleep. I hate all that touching because he prevents me from sleeping while I've continually said no. I'm not saying no to sex, I'm saying leave me alone when I'm sleeping. Is that too much to ask? It is getting to the point where I dislike having sex with him. I am okay with having sex at almost any other time, but not when I'm trying to sleep or preparing to go to work. Can you imagine getting to work stressed out very early in the morning, and being unproductive throughout the day because you couldn't rest well all night? I want to believe that we didn't marry just to have sex. So why does it need to be so much of a priority when we both have other responsibilities? Why do we need to rush, when we know that sex is always going to be there? I married a person to love, not a body to have sex with. We have kids to take care of. We have jobs to do. I still find him attractive, but I just don't have the energy to have sex regularly. Is it too much to ask my husband to care about my pleasure during sex? I keep thinking about this issue, and the more I think about it, the more it confuses me. I would ask myself questions like, is my husband raping me? He does not seem to care about my desires or respect my consent. He puts his need for sex ahead of my need for sleep, and it is affecting my physical and mental well-being. I prefer sex to be when we both agree to it, because that's when it is enjoyable. Right now, it feels very one-sided and depressing, because he only cares about having it when he is in the mood. If I'm awake, yes, why not? But touching me sexually after I say no, and depriving me of sleep seems abusive to me. This obsession has gotten to the point where I think it is developing to a sex addiction. I don't even know how to talk to him about it without causing a fight. I can't keep up, and it feels like I have to sacrifice my own needs and desires to keep him happy. I can't sleep because he wakes me up in the middle of the night. And I can't focus at work because I'm tired and stressed out. It's like I'm living in a constant state of tension. I'm anxious about going to bed because I know he'll wake me up. I'm tired all the time because I can't get enough sleep. I feel guilty when I say no, but when I give in, I feel bitter towards him. It's a terrible situation to be in. When I try to raise this issue with him, he thinks I'm overreacting or that I don't love him enough. And he is really good at avoiding confrontations. Our arguments are usually one-woman shows, and by that, I mean he stares off into space or busies himself on his phone while I'm talking. If we fight in bed, he would pretend to fall asleep, sometimes he would even fake snoring. The closest I got to communication was when he told me, if we want a boy, we have to keep trying, or this is what marriage is about. What can I do about this? I want to save our marriage, but I also need to feel like a person, not just an object for his satisfaction. One day, I decided to talk to my close friend, Rosemary, about this issue. She said keeping a marriage with a man with a high sex drive can be very difficult, because some men don't really understand the pains women go through, trying to keep up with a man that demands for sex almost every time. She said some men believe that because they've paid the bride price for their wife, they can demand sex from her anytime they want. Many societies also expect a married woman to be submissive to the needs of her husbands, because he paid a bride price to marry her. They believe it is part of your marital duties as a woman, and women who don't agree are criticized by the society. She said I have to be careful with how I handle the situation, because if I refuse him, he might feel justified to look for sex outside the marriage. Rosemary also shared her own experience with me. She has been married for over 10 years, and she said she has been having a similar experience. Her husband demands sex every day except when she's on her period. She said they have had series of fights because of this issue, but her husband refuses to change. She said most times she will start fights because she doesn't want to do, but her husband will still come for it. She said how she has been coping for more than 3 years now is by lying back and letting him do what he wants without participating. She believes most men will not understand what she's going through, having to deal with a husband with high sex libido. But because divorce is not an option for her, she has learned to cope with it. Rosemary says it's just a part of marriage, but it doesn't feel right to me. I can't keep living like this. I was even more confused after speaking to Rosemary. How am I supposed to continue to cope with something that I'm very uncomfortable with, and doesn't respect my own wishes? And on this issue of bride price, does paying a bride price means a woman has to be totally submissive to her husband, even when it is not comfortable for her? Does it mean a woman can't have a say in her marriage? Why do people also believe a man is justified to seek sex outside his marriage if his wife denies him? While I was asking Rosemary these questions that were disturbing me, one of the customers in her supermarket, who had been listening to our conversation all along, without our knowledge, politely asked if she could contribute to the discussion. She introduced herself as Blessing, and said that our conversation caught her attention because she also faced a similar issue in her marriage. And it was the reason for why her marriage crashed. However, in her own case, she was married to a man who was not as interested in sex as she was. Her husband had a low sex drive, unlike mine. She wanted sex more regularly, but her husband didn't. She said it felt embarrassing that she wanted sex more than her husband, and she tried to explain to him that she had a higher sex drive and would like to have sex more often, but those conversations didn't lead to any changes. Her husband couldn't satisfy her sexual needs because he didn't like sex as much as her. She said anytime she was in the mood for sex, and she told him of her needs, he would change the subject or make excuses like using their child's presence as an excuse, or say he was too tired. She said she couldn't help feeling like she was personally rejected in the bedroom, and it made her feel like she was undesirable. The situation made her sad, angry, and resentful towards her husband, which she told him. She would ask him if everything was okay, but his excuse was always that he was tired and stressed out from work. She didn't really know how to handle being sexually rejected by a man, and it made her wish that she had a discussion with him as regards their sexual compatibility before they got married. It was very disturbing for her as a young woman, having to deal with that kind of issue. She said she felt ashamed and guilty for wanting sex more than her husband. I felt very sorry for her. Her story was an eye-opener for me. It made me realize that there is a minority of women in marriages that feel undesired and unattractive because their husbands can satisfy their sexual needs. It also showed me that the toxic stereotypes that all men want sex all the time, and women don't want sex, or women shouldn't want sex more than men isn't true. Because in her own case, her husband didn't value sex in the same way she did, which I imagine must have been frustrating for her. And for a moment, I thought, am I wrong? It actually made me question whether I was being selfish for wanting sex only when I was in the mood for it. But then, I asked myself, is my husband's high sex drive an excuse for me to give in to his demands for sex every time? I want to find a middle ground that respects both his needs and my boundaries. I want to make this work, but I also need to feel respected and heard. How do I balance his needs with my own? Please, I need serious advice. What should I do if my husband's sexual needs are not compatible with mine? I am tired, because my husband keeps demanding for sex even when I'm not interested. This is a breaking point for me, and it is already getting to the point where I'm starting to hate having sex with him. I'm so at a loss, please help.